Welcome to part 2. Once you've received a reasonable number of applications, you've got two options as to how you proceed with the process of whittling down the list still further. The first option is to go through the credentials of each individual applicant to assess whether they seem likely candidates for the work you have in mind. This is a relatively easy thing to do using either Elance or freelancer.com, because both these sites publish information about their writers that includes things like ratings from other site users, the amount of money they've earned, what they've been doing, and so on. Consequently, because both of these sites are highly professional, you can gather a great deal of information about potential ghostwriters with whom you might work over and above the information that they themselves give on the site. You should also have a figure in front of you for how much they would like to charge for the job, which is going to be another factor that's relevant to your final decision. After all, if they're asking for $20 per article, then you obviously can't afford to use this particular individual because there'll be absolutely no profit available to you if you were to do so. Now, armed with this information, you may then make some initial selection decisions based on things like their site ratings, the amount that they're charging, their previous experience levels, etc. Sometimes applying this pre-selection process works extremely well, especially in those situations where there are some applicants who are clearly and obviously unsuitable for the work that you have in mind. On the other hand, you may well find that it's very difficult to make any decisions for or against based on the information that you already have, in which case you should move straight on to the next stage. Whether you've been able to narrow down the initial applicants to a shortlist or not, the next thing to do is to ask the applicants in whom you're still interested to undertake a specific task. Before you can arrive at any final decisions, you had asked for samples of their work. However, if you simply ask them for a sample, they will quite obviously submit what they consider to be their best work to you, which in fact is unlikely to help you for a couple of reasons. First of all, you're going to receive a range of articles about almost every subject under the sun, and unless you know about every subject, then it's not going to be easy to assess how good or how bad the writing and information contained in the article genuinely is. Secondly, this does nothing to indicate how good their research and writing capabilities will be when they're creating articles on the subjects that you dictate, so again, asking for a random sample of work is a waste of time. And finally, if they submit written articles that they've used elsewhere, which is what normally happens if you just ask for samples, then you've got no indication as to how good they are at writing unique content under pressure. As it's only unique content that has a genuine value to your clients, this is a crucial consideration, one which you cannot afford to ignore. Consequently, just asking for samples is a non-starter for three extremely important reasons. What you should do, in fact, is to ask them for 2 articles focused on a specific topic in your market about which you're knowledgeable. Give them an angle that you want this article to be written from as well, because this makes the test even more valid. You also want to stress that the work they submit must be unique, something that they have written from scratch. Emphasize that the article must be 450 to 500 words long, and that the work has to be submitted to you privately within 48 or 72 hours if you're feeling generous. You should also make it absolutely clear that there's going to be no payment for these articles because they're a test. Now, by instructing your applicants in this way, you're going to ensure the results satisfy all of our test criteria. This is, for example, a test of determination and character, as there will be a percentage of applicants who simply can't be bothered to put in the effort if they're not going to get paid for it. And this is an excellent weeding out step, as you immediately find the more determined characters who are likely to come through, as opposed to the ones who are lazy and therefore have no value to your business. Next, because you've asked them to write about a specific topic, what you're doing is you're testing their ability to research the subject about which they may know fairly little. Furthermore, because you know your subject fairly intimately, you're better able to assess the quality of their writing, particularly if they're outside their normal comfort zone. Despite your instructions, some of the applicants will simply ignore the notion that the articles are to be between 450 and 500 words long. Perhaps in the mistaken belief that more is always better, some of the applicants will write 600 words or more, while a small handful will contribute less than the requested 450 words. In both cases, the applicant is clearly indicating that they do what they want rather than what you've asked them to do. In other words, they either cannot or will not follow instructions, and this should disbar them from any further consideration. By giving them a deadline, you test their ability to both work under pressure and to submit their work on time. While the fact that they submit their work on time during a test does not conclusively prove that they are always going to be so punctual, it is as good an indication as you can realistically hope for in the circumstances. Finally, because you've asked them to write unique articles from scratch, you can check whether the content they submit has been used anywhere else on the net. This is something that you must do because the number of times applicants will think that they can get away with submitting duplicate content that they found on another website as their own work is often quite staggering. To test for uniqueness, you have a couple of options, one of which is considerably more thorough than the other, but it takes a bit more time as well. A quick option is to copy a sentence or two from an article before pasting that passage of text into a standard Google search window. Google will look for these sentences on the net, and if they find them, you've probably got duplicate content. You might, however, run this test with 2 or 3 different passages of text rather than just one, so you can test the veracity of the results. Another option is to use a service like Copyscape, which you can find here at copyscape.com. And what these services do is they review the whole of your article before searching for materials that are published elsewhere on the net which match any selection of your article. The problem with using Copyscape is that unless you have a Premier account, which you can sign up for here, the content that you want to compare has to be published somewhere on the net before you can run your test. Now, while this is not particularly complex, what you can do is create a Blogger blog, come here to blogger.com, and create a blog purely for testing purposes so that you can test as many articles as you want by publishing them, testing them, and then simply deleting them. It's a simple way, but it is still time consuming. After testing your applicants down this way, you'll probably have a relatively short shortlist. It's therefore time to take the selection process to the next stage. If you're using either Elance or freelancer.com, you have the ability to communicate directly with the applicants that you're considering by direct message. And this gives you the opportunity to get to know them a little better while also assessing just how committed they might be to the long-term nature of your project. This is an extremely important point as the majority of jobs posted on these 2 sites tend to be irregular and/or temporary in nature. It's therefore vital that you contact shortlisted applicants to explain that what you're looking for is a long-term commitment from both sides of the fence. This may or may not be something with which they are comfortable, which is exactly why it's something that you need to clarify right from the very beginning. Trying to give them some idea of the amount of work that you're likely to ask them to do on a weekly or monthly basis, as this allows them to get a clearer picture of exactly what you mean when you're talking about a long-term commitment. Communicating with people using direct messaging systems also gives you another indication about how good they are at responding in a timely manner. While you must accept that at least some of the people on the shortlist could live in a time zone that's a long way from your own, you would naturally expect a reasonably prompt response when you're offering them a long-term position. One other thing that I find helps to narrow down my final choice is to open a communication channel with shortlisted applicants in real time, and you can use a service like Skype, which you can come here to skype.com, or Yahoo Messenger, which is messenger.yahoo.com. And this allows you to talk with candidates for free over the internet. And once a successful candidate is selected, it's very important to be able to communicate with them using instant communication channels like this. Starting now helps you to assess whether time differences, for example, are likely to be a major barrier to working together, while also allowing you to get an even better impression of what each individual shortlisted applicant is like. Depending on the length of your shortlist and how this particular stage of the selection process goes, you'll ultimately be left with a final couple of choices. Either you will have a standout candidate who, in your opinion, is clearly better than anyone else, in which case you offer the 5-article project to them without any further delay. Or on the other hand, you may have 2 or even 3 candidates who are all so close together that it's practically impossible to separate them. In this situation, and assuming that you can afford an additional $50 or $60, ask all 3 of them to undertake a 5-article project for you and tell them that the best submission wins. After all, if you ask all of the applicants for 5 articles, each candidate is going to provide 5 unique pieces of content that you can use to promote your business, so running this final test is not a waste of money by any stretch of the imagination. Whether you choose to have a final comparison test in this way or whether you select an outright winner without doing so, you should now have a ghostwriter that you're 100% confident that you can work with. This being the case, you're ready to move on to the next stage of the operation. Before you're in a position to launch your service, there are a few final administrative matters to take care of. The first thing that you must have is a very definite agreement in place with your ghostwriters as to exactly how much you'll pay them and for what. For instance, if you're going to focus your business on producing 400 to 500 word articles, there must be a clear, unequivocal agreement in place that stipulates exactly how much you'll pay them, with somewhere around $4 to $8 per article being a good starting point. In this situation, I would suggest that you pay them a little more than the $4 base rate because you're relying on their loyalty to a certain degree, and loyalty doesn't come without a price attached. In this situation, I'll be looking to pay $6 or perhaps $7 per article as a way of ensuring that my writers stay on side. In addition, it's often a good idea to include performance incentives as well, because it definitely helps to keep your writers on their toes. For example, instead of offering a flat $7 per article, you could offer $6 plus an additional $1 for every article that's accepted by the client as it is the first time. In other words, these are articles that they don't ask you to modify or alter, which is something that's going to happen. On top of this, you might add an additional $20 for every 20 consecutive articles accepted by clients on the same basis, or something similar of this nature. The reason that you do this is that what will ultimately dictate the success of your business is your ability to deliver high quality, unique content straight to your clients on a regular basis that they can use straight out of the box. Again, it doesn't need modifying or altering. Now, if you can do this, not only will your reputation with your existing clients skyrocket, it becomes far more likely that these existing clients will recommend your services to their business colleagues, other site owners, online marketers that they know, and so on. Consequently, having some kind of bonus structure in place that is based on your writers producing a constant flow of top quality content that's almost always accepted by your clients is an extremely sound long-term business development move. You need to agree with your ghostwriters on the amount of work that you expect them to do in terms of articles per month and the turnaround time that's expected of them. Turnaround time and the ability to hit deadlines is something else that can be tied into your bonus system in the same way as well. There must also be an agreement between you and your writer as to exactly how you pay them. Although this becomes a less critical factor with the passage of time, it's extremely important in the beginning. At this point, you must have an agreement that all parties are satisfied with. The last thing you need is unnecessary friction with your writer, so it's vital to get all possible points of dispute settled before they arise. Most commonly, you can choose to pay your writer 100% up front, agree some kind of 50-50 deal, 50% on submitting the order, 50% on completion, for example. Or you can use the escrow service as offered by Elance and freelancer.com. There's no single best option on how you pay your ghostwriters, although I will caution against paying 100% upfront, especially in the early days. Escrow is the safest option, but using the service usually incurs additional fees, so a 50-50 split of some description is a fairly common method of remunerating your ghostwriter. Another thing that you must do is ensure that the lines of communication between you and your ghostwriters are always open. You need to know that you can contact them at any time, either by instant chat if you're both awake at the same time, or by email when one party or the other is fast asleep. It also makes a lot of sense to have an agreed reporting system in place from the beginning so that you can keep a close eye on where your writers are in terms of the work that they're supposed to be doing. Now, whether you choose to do this on a formal or informal basis is not particularly important, just so long as you have a reporting system in place that's understood by both parties. With your first ghostwriter in place and everything agreed between the two of you, you're ready to move into the next stage, which is to finalize your business plan before putting the whole thing into action. And we'll cover how you do that in the next video.